to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into overrated players. Welcome to the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, and tonight we are going to be talking about some of the most overrated players that we think are in Devy football, in college football, and possibly moving on to the NFL this year. And when I say we, you know I can't do this alone, so I got to bring on Aaron Wilcox and Andy Starr. And I'm going to ask Andy tonight, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. We do something similar to this every year. We've gotten some good call outs in the past. Mekhi Hughes stands out. I'm sure there's a few more that I'm forgetting. But it's a good exercise to do. This is a weird year for me because I'm looking at like the rankings that other people put out, that we put out, and there's not like a guy that sticks out to me as like being just such an egregiously bad overranking that like it gets me so fired up that I have to go on like a huge diatribe like we did with Mekhi Hughes last year. But there's still some discrepancies that I feel like need to be sorted out, and we will try and touch on some of those today, obviously.
Aaron, we were saying that Andy needed to have a little more hate in his heart, all that kind of good stuff before we started the pod. Are you feeling the heat? Are you feeling some overrated players? Are you kind of stuck in the middle there as well?
Well, I'm always excited for this conversation because sometimes we do have some differing opinions here. So it's fun to see. Ultimately, we just kind of lay the cards out, and hey, listeners can side with who they want, or a lot of times we do agree on many of these takes and much of the analysis as well, though too. So no, it'll be good to get into them, and we're gonna mention some guys that we've even talked about, on previous podcasts, but focus on some new names tonight as well. So that's always fun.
Yeah, that was one thing we talked about behind the scenes was, we've mentioned, I guess we can go ahead and talk about him here, but, we've mentioned Dante Moore a lot as a player that we're not really overly fond of as a pod. We've mentioned Bryce Underwood quite a bit recently and how he's overrated. And, now there's news that he's possibly going to be benched and things. And it's kind of wild. I don't know how realistic it is. It seems so unrealistic, but even just the fact that it's being talked about is kind of wild, to begin with. And the fact that it's being talked about means maybe it will or could possibly happen. I don't know. But we're not going to talk about him, at least a deep dive into him. We've talked about Kawan Lacey quite a bit. I think we are all kind of lower on Kawan Lacey. I think maybe I'm the lowest, I believe. But we've talked about him quite enough. And then, Malachi Tony, that's just... there's somebody that at least I've talked about recently about how, he has to grow as a player. The ADOT's too low, stuff like that. But, at this point, we kind of have to see what happens and see if he does grow before we truly dive in any more into him as a player. I think that's it. Were there any other names that we've talked about quite a bit that we need to get out before we actually dive into the good or the overrated players here?
I'll let Andy speak up if there's more names that come to mind that we've, discussed a fair amount previously. But I will say with Malachi Tony, I just see so many similarities to Casey Concepcion and the start of Concepcion's career there. And it took him a couple of years to really develop into more of a nuanced player, more of a downfield utilization. I think that we see some of that get unlocked this year with Darian Mensah, who's a capable quarterback, especially more so passing downfield compared to Carson Beck last year. And yeah, I just kind of like what Malachi Tony's skill set is. Understanding that yes, he's far from like a complete player at this point, but as a second year player, I think Malachi has a lot of just abilities with the ball in his hands, but then also without too. I think he can be a capable route runner. I don't think he's going to be necessarily an outside guy, right? Winning on the outside, he's just not that type. But I still have a lot of hope for him. But when he is priced as a top 4 Devy wide receiver, that's pretty lofty when you're banking on a pretty big leap in his utilization and his production.
Sure. Andy, was there anyone we forgot?
I think we kind of covered it. I'll also say you mentioned that we're not quite as low on Kawan Lacey as you are. I think that's accurate. I think that in some respects the Devy community's catching on because you're seeing Kawan Lacey's rankings just sort of slowly drop as the offseason goes on. Because I think he was originally being priced as like this dynamic every down back, and now people are starting to see like, well, maybe those 29 receptions weren't like indicative of him being like a dynamic receiver. And I do think people are starting to catch on with that, and his ranking is getting closer to where it needs to be. But yeah, I think the big ones were obviously Bryce Underwood, who we've hit on, Dante Moore, we've done a ton. And I'm with Aaron, same thing on Malachi Tony. Like, I do think he's overrated, but I also at the same time think that there are steps that can be had this season and next season where maybe he does become a top 5 wide receiver in whatever draft class he decides to come out in. And I'm trying to like look at some of the running backs here. I guess we could say Jordan Marshall because I feel like I hit him pretty hard during this offseason for his ranking. So I probably won't delve too much into that anymore either. And Nate Frazier. I don't think we need to touch any more on Nate Frazier, right? Like we've done the Nate Frazier thing.
Yeah, I mean, although I still am hearing hype. Wasn't he comped to Nick Chubb recently on Twitter? Yeah, that's a thing that was said, and I don't understand it. But no, I mean, you could probably.
I mean, we could do it again. I don't think we've hit him quite as hard as some of the other guys, but I mean, it's probably pretty obvious at this point that we're not big Nate Frazier fans.
Yeah, I'll just say this really quick, and I said it behind the scenes to Aaron. Last year we had kind of a tiff about Damon Claiborne, and Aaron was saying he was kind of in. I was saying I was 100% out, and I said, how can you be that fast and yet never break big plays? And supposedly Nate Frazier is that kind of player, although he's bigger. He's much bigger than Claiborne, obviously, but he's supposed to be able to break big plays and do things like that, and yet he never does. And so it's like, how can you be that fast and that explosive and all that stuff and yet never break big plays? Something's off there. I'm not a fan. I think I'll leave it at that unless you guys have anything else to add. We can go ahead and dive in to our list here. I want to start off easy, we'll work our way into it. I didn't want to get too crazy right off the riff and, have people, be like, wait, well, this is a wild podcast. I wanted to start off a little easier, but I think I am going to upset people with this one. Now I want to be very clear that just because I'm saying he's overrated does not mean that I think he's terrible. It does not mean that I don't even like him or I wouldn't even draft him or wouldn't want him on my team. However, Decorian Moore is being drafted as the wide receiver 3, somewhere like 3 to 5 range right now, for most experts or whatever, rankings wise. And I just can't do it. I cannot do it. Looking through, I went through his entire game log and just said, just show me like one flash where you really took over a game and you were the wide receiver 1 for that team and no one could deny you and all that. And it's just not there. I know a lot of people will point to the injury and say, that sapped his season, that took away what could have been an amazing season. He wasn't really taking over, doing anything overly amazing in year 1 before he even got injured. He got injured in week 9. He missed a few weeks. He came back. I'm not even counting the games that he came back for against him. We'll just assume that he was not healthy at that point. So I'm not even saying, oh, he came back and he did absolutely nothing. That's fine. I'm not counting those games. But what he did in those first 8 weeks before then was not something that makes me say wide receiver three overall when we have this coveted 27 class that everyone loves all these wide receivers and everything. So why wouldn't we take these players and put them ahead of a Decorian Moore where they're already proven they've already been there, done that? And one of the biggest things for me is, okay, yeah, he got hurt. He didn't get to take a step forward in the end of the season as a freshman, but he has a 14.5 ADOT, which is great. I'd love to see that for a wide receiver. The problem is his quarterback, who didn't go to the NFL, he's still his quarterback this year, has a 9.1 intended air yards. Those numbers don't match up. He's so like you have a quarterback who wants to dink and dunk and is not pushing the ball down the field, and then you have a player who's playing that big X, deep, or I guess maybe he's even playing the Z at a 14.5. Whatever level he's playing at, he's obviously playing the deeper levels of the field, and that's not where Dante Moore thrives. So I don't see anything drastically changing this year. And then obviously, you can say they're bringing in Jalen Lott. We're thinking Jamar Johnson's probably going to take a step forward. I've heard a lot of people freaking out about their new freshman tight end or their new, tight end that's come in there and everything. So I just feel like not that much has changed, and the, and nothing really said this guy is the wide receiver three overall on Devy. So I mean, you guys, I don't think you guys can really argue the whole like we got to push some of these proven players above him thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I am a Decory Moore fan as far as going back to his prospect profile, but like you said, it was not a complete freshman season by any means. I guess I fall somewhere in the middle there. Like, I don't think he should be going at the wide receiver three type of price, but I also have him, solidly in that tier where he's kind of between like wide receiver 4 to 7 for me. So I still am pretty high just because we saw enough flashes from a guy who was very, very good as a clear lead guy in his class last year as a freshman coming out of high school. So, former 5-star guy. He did enough there where I think he's going to have a promising future. It's just, can he get there from a nuanced development standpoint? Needs to build up the physicality and obviously stay healthy. So I do like Decory Moore probably a little bit more, but I can get on board with being a little bit overrated or overhyped there at wide receiver 3 at this stage.
Yeah, and just for example, I have him as wide receiver 15 overall. So once again, I'm not hating the player. I'm not saying he's terrible, but I'm just not ready. Especially with all the proven players that we do have right now, I'm not ready to push him up that high. And our best friend Felix Sharp is in the chat, and he says that's crazy because those intended air yards came from the same QB. And I agree with you. That's the whole point, Felix. If you were listening, it's because he doesn't throw that way very often. So that's why the intended air yards are lower. So I'm not even saying he can't do it or won't do it, but I don't think we can expect a huge year out of Decorian Moore. And that's the only way that I can really have him at wide receiver 3 is if we're sitting there going 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns, like that kind of thing. When is that going to happen? I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, and I also have to think of it like even if he doesn't break out with like a 1,200-yard season, like you're saying, I still think he'll have a large enough share. Though you made a good point with Jamari Johnson and other legitimate receiving options being present there at Oregon, and they're going to try to run the heck out of the ball this season again.
Yeah, I think what Felix was trying to say is like there's not going to be many college quarterbacks that have like intended air yards for their entire season over 11 even now. It seems like at this stage in college football, it seems like 10 point something has kind of been the ceiling for the last few years. So, if you're thinking about adding or subtracting a yard from somebody's intended air yards for the season, that might be within like the margin of error. But I tend to agree more with Aaron, and I think this is just goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the episode is like I just don't feel a lot of conviction because I can get behind saying that Decorrian Moore is overrated at wide receiver three. Um, but I don't think I can get behind saying like he's not a top 10 Devy wide receiver for me. Which to me just doesn't, it feels like we're just sort of, grasping at straws at the difference here. Even though I understand like the ADP, might be several rounds different. But yeah, I would much prefer, some of these guys that are going, especially in Devy, some of these guys that are planning or we expect to go pro in 2027, like, assuming Wesco is healthy, TJ Moore, Ryan Coleman Williams having a bounce back year, Nick Marsh, all these guys, Jace Brown, there's a lot of guys that we think are going to come out next year who have potential for as day one picks already, and that have put multiple seasons together where you can feel more comfortable with them. Having said that, like I'm not mad at Decorrian Moore's season last year. I think he had a fine enough market share as a true freshman. He looked good from a yards per route run standpoint, looked good from an ADOT standpoint. So I don't have anything to be mad about. The fact, obviously the reason that he is kind of maintaining this wide receiver three value is because he was thought of so highly as a recruit. If Devin Roebuck was on Oregon, had put up the exact same numbers, he wouldn't. It wouldn't be wide receiver three just because Roebuck was not this 5-star guy coming in. So part of it isn't, I don't want to call it take lock, but it's just saying like, hey, this guy's a guy we liked coming in last year, and he did things that were good, so we're going to keep him there. So I like I said, I can get behind calling him overrated, but I'm not going to like sit here and be like, it's so egregious that it's
like I said,
we
we were starting easy, baby. We're easing our way in. This was not.
Right.
This was saying drop him from wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 10. Let's do that. I think I'd be happy there. Or if you want to say wide receiver 8, whatever. I'm sure there's probably a tier if we really wanted to nitpick, and we could say wherever you want to throw him into that tier is fine. I'm just wondering. People are so down on like a Ryan Coleman Williams right now. Could you trade away Decorrian Moore and get Ryan Williams plus? And is that a better choice? Or if you're in a draft, obviously if you're in some kind of startup draft or something like that, then you can trade the equivalent picks to make that kind of thing work, where you get a Ryan Williams instead of Decorrian Moore. And when I'm thinking that way, then I go, hey, this player is overrated. Once again, he could easily take a step forward. I think he will be fine. I just don't know. And I mean, honestly, we have no. Like, if you want to say that Kenyon Sadiq is history for putting out proven wide receivers, I guess we can count it. But what proven wide receivers has Oregon pushed out to the NFL? Troy Franklin is the only one that we can really mention, and he was a 4th-round pick and could end up as hardly anything like when we actually consider his NFL career and everything. As much as I like Troy Franklin, it's hard to even say, oh well, it's Oregon, they're gonna put out a top 10 guy or top 5 guy or whatever. Like, no, we can't say that. And Kenyon Sadiq was probably more about his freak athleticism than anything else, and I don't think Decorrian Moore has that. Aaron, I thought Aaron was going to say something, but he did not. So we will go ahead and move on. I started easy. Andy, you said you had you had a few for us, but you weren't feeling too overly confident about any of them. So just give us an easy one. Somebody feels a little overrated, and we'll get into the good ones here in a little bit.
Okay. Well, see, like another one that I've already harped on quite a bit is Justice Haynes, and I think that he had a good enough season at Michigan last year where I'm not even going to really complain too much about him. So I'm gonna have to go a little bit further down the running back rankings, to get to a guy that I think doesn't really belong. Like the thing about running back position in Devy right now, it's pretty deep, and like most of the guys, like you get into the 20s even, I can make an argument for a lot of them being NFL talented running backs. The one that I can't is somebody who puts up a ton of yards, but just never has shown that he has like the juice to be anything more than a college running back. And I think he's probably going as like a top 20, top 25 running back right now, and it's BYU's LJ Martin. Um, so this might not be too spicy, but because it is a little bit further down the ranks, so maybe we're still in that easy category. But LJ Martin's a guy that, like I said, he's 1,000 yard running back. He's been doing it for a couple years, and if you're just looking at his big run rate, it's like right around like 5%. He just doesn't seem dynamic at all. One of these guys that's like an Emmett Johnson, where you're just feeding him the rock way too many times per game, or like a Kendrick Raphael for that matter, and he's just racking up yards. So like I said, it's tough for me this year to find anything super spicy because I feel like, especially in the running back position, most of these guys I could say a lot of nice things about. But LJ Martin, when I'm looking at some of the rankings, kind of just pops out as somebody who probably just doesn't belong with the rest of them.
I get it. I mean, I have LJ Martin a little bit lower than for example, Devy ADP that's coming in from campus2canton.com. So he's going at RB20, for example, in that Devy ADP. I have him at 27. I guess I don't feel strongly about it. Like I'm there with you. He doesn't do a lot of things in a special way. He's just solid all around, both within the rushing game, within being a red zone, rushing back, goal line type of back, and then also being a sufficient but not special receiver. So LJ Martin, yeah, he's a fine player. I think he's better for C2C leagues compared to true high-end Devy upside.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get a little spicier here in a minute, but I'm fine with it. He's my RB 43 in Devy. So if he's going at 20, that's definitely overrated. I'm not, but then again, you could probably list 10 other players in the 20s or 30s range that I would say don't even deserve to be up there in the top 50 or something like that. So I'm with both of you there. Like, I don't really think that he's much of an actual NFL back. Anyone that's gonna wow you. Like, he'll probably end up on an NFL team, but it's not anything that I'm gonna like freak out about and hope for the best. And the numbers just are kind of meh all across the board. So I'm with you on LJ Martin being overrated. Aaron said he had some players on his mind, but he didn't really have like an actual list. So I'm gonna go ahead and just talk about a player who's right above LJ Martin for me in my ranks, and yet he is considered a almost a top 12 running back by some of the services or some of the websites here in Devy, and that's Wayman Jordan, obvious out of USC. Obviously, we know he got hurt last year, but then he actually either had a recurrence or had some kind of issue this offseason where he's still not practicing. I don't know exactly the details, but I know there's been concerns about him not practicing, not being ready for fall now, like things like that. That's obviously not great. That's not even necessarily why I'm looking at him and saying he's overrated. I just think it's kind of a player who's just not even that spectacular. He's a fifth year player at this point. And yet, I don't know that a lot of people realize that, because if you go look at sportsreference.com, it shows him as a junior last year. Well, he was actually a JUCO transfer, and he actually was, I don't know if he missed a year because of injury or whatever, but he actually, was in the JUCO level for 3 years, at least from his recruit dates and everything. So this is his fifth year in college football. Nothing really stands out, and he was playing in the earlier games of the season. When you're probably hoping for a lot of efficiency, a lot of big plays and everything. So even with that, he wasn't overly efficient. His receiving numbers are okay, nothing to write home about. His rushing numbers were okay, nothing to write home about. And yet there's been a lot of people saying, "Oh, Wayman Jordan, like he's the guy you got to have." And like I said, as high as like at least a top 15 player for some rankings. I just can't do it. He's like barely top 40 for me. And that's even without necessarily considering like the injuries and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not a fan. Give me King Miller all day, every day, and I will be a happy man. And if anything, I mean, now that I have mentioned the injury, that just opens the door for King Miller to just slam it shut for Wayman and us to never talk about him ever again.
Yeah, I think it's risky, right? Because Waymon Jordan was having a really great season before he got hurt last year. Um, over, about a 10% big time run rate. Breakaway yards per attempt looks good. Yeah, he wasn't getting anything in the receiving game, but it didn't seem between him, Eli Sanders, and King Miller, like they had, let's see, like barely 30 receptions on the season between the three of them. So it didn't feel like that was what USC was trying to do with their offense. Um, so I'm not really gonna knock him too hard for the receiving game. Granted that it definitely was not like there as something that's elite, so I can't really call it a plus either. It is the reason I say it's risky is because if he does come back 100% healthy and just bodies King Miller and comes out and has a great season again, then it will justify where he's going as like a top, let's say, 12, 15 running back, which I don't think is it's too crazy high or anything. It's just it's fine. Um, that's kind of where I'm at with it too. I there's certainly guys I have ahead of him. There's another team that has kind of a similar situation with guys coming back from injury, where it's just you've got guys that were successful last year who were healthy coming back, and it's trying to figure out which ones are going to take over. I think USC's in that same situation. Texas Tech being the other team that I'm talking about. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens because if King Miller does take over, then yeah, Waymon Jordan's value just it bottoms out, goes straight to the basement.
Well, like I said, it was the beginning of the season. He only played 6 games last year before getting hurt. So the beginning of the season, his best 2 games were against Georgia Southern and Michigan State. I don't know what Michigan State's defense is like. I'm just gonna assume it's really bad. Like I know it's a pretty bad team, and obviously Georgia Southern, not anyone that we're gonna sit there and freak out about. So I mean, I don't want to be the guy that's like, oh, take away those games, but kind of take away those games. Look at his last 2 games before he got hurt. He played Illinois and Michigan. He went 20 for 94, 4.7 yards in it per rush for against Illinois, and then he went 11 for 39, 3.5 yards per attempt against Michigan. And then obviously he got hurt. I don't know if he got hurt in the Michigan game or after that, but I mean those numbers are just already coming down. Before they truly got into the Big Ten schedule and everything, what would the rest of the season have looked like? Probably closer to that like 5 yards per carry range, not 6, 7, whatever, yards per carry that we really like to see from stud running backs. So even his big time run rate, like it all looks good. But when you really truly consider everything that he did and the fact that he played really easy competition, I'm kind of even more scared of it.
So I do have a couple different thoughts, and I'll get to why I looked so distracted here in just a second as well, because I just moved up to on the clock in the C2C supplemental that Andy and I are in. So I am picking 2 slots ahead of Andy. So I did make a
Nice.
on podcast live trade. But
Love it.
anyways, to kind of wrap up thoughts that we were on there, I just think with the USC running back room and going back to Lincoln Riley's days, even at Oklahoma, like Kennedy Brooks, Ramondre Stevenson, exceptionally efficient players at different points in their career. Obviously, Ramondre has carved out an NFL career. Kennedy Brooks, obviously not, right? So I guess at the end of the day, you look at the USC backs as well in recent years. Like we had Marshawn Lloyd, we had Quinn Joyner, we had Jaquavius Marks, we had Travis Dye, and then going back to last year, Eli Sanders, King Miller, Waymon, like they all look pretty solid. So I guess we shouldn't fall too much for the efficiency numbers within that system, right? It just seems like most of the backs there are efficient runners, and we are seeing a pattern of guys not really working out at the NFL level. Some of it's health, right? Maybe Marshawn Lloyd would have been good. I don't know. He's had a million injuries. Quinn Joyner's been injured, right? I mean, there's extenuating circumstances for these guys. Long way of me saying Waymon Jordan. I don't think that we should overvalue some of the efficiency that we saw. He looked pretty good, but it is a running back friendly system. And then like you guys made a point of, and we've made a point in the past, we like King Miller. Like he's an explosive back as well. And then you'll see maybe like the freshman Rodeau factor in there this season somewhat too. So I guess at the end of the day, yeah, I'm pretty much on board with Waymon Jordan fade, or at least calling him a little bit overrated. I have him just outside of the top 20 Devy running backs in my personal rankings, though I did move him up a few slots the other day, but that's more so because I was adjusting some other guys down.
That's fair enough. Aaron, you said you had a couple for us. You want to save them for a little bit later, get spicy, or you want to go ahead and throw one out there? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. I am back. I'll tell you who's not overrated, and that's Jonas Williams, who I just selected at USC. Speaking of USC, at 704, had to trade up to select the freshman quarterback, the heir apparent to the very, very much lauded and anticipated quarterback position for Lincoln Riley. So we'll see if
As
that
Andy
pans out
checks
there.
his phone to make sure that it's real. Yeah.
Right. I was like,
It's
is he still
real.
available? There's no way. There's no way.
It happened.
In the 7th round. So, anyways, no, I will give the podcast listeners a name here, and that is also at the quarterback position. A guy who's rated pretty highly, or at least he's going pretty early in campus to Canton mock Devy drafts, and that's Sam Levitt. Sam Levitt going from Arizona State over to LSU, and I'm just not on board with that. Like he's going as a top 10 guy still, coming off of injury, an inconsistent season. Yes, he had one good season, absolutely, throwing to Jordan Tyson. I think that was the Cam Scatterbo year as well. So just like a humming offense for sure. But he had some good weapons, good players around him. I think he's still going to have some solid players going over to LSU, but it would not surprise me at all to see a guy who I have ranked higher beat him out at some point in the season for that quarterback job. So I think that Houston Longstreet, who also is a highly talented guy coming over to LSU as well, could be somebody who could unseat Sam Levitt this year. I don't see the high-end traits. I know Levitt's got some mobility to his game, absolutely, but he's not the most accurate passer out there. Like he's not the most turnover-prone guy, but the accuracy, I see that kind of missing. The top-end arm strength missing. He's not a true Konami code as far as like the rushing upside when that's going to translate to the NFL level, but I will give him credit for being a fairly mobile player, fairly effective player when he is healthy, but there's just some question marks within like his ability to maybe even hold down the job this year. Is he going to be healthy? Is he going to mesh with that system, which should be a fantasy friendly system? Yes, for Lane Kiffin at LSU, but I mean, there's question marks there for Sam Levitt. I think he's going too high. I have him closer to like quarterback 20 compared to like a top 10 guy.
I'm 100% on board with this one. He was my next player I was going to bring up, so I'm with you here. He is my QB 16 overall in Devy, but that's not saying much because there's probably 5 QBs that I even care about. So, I think he got a lot of hype, being talked about as the number 1 QB in the portal and things like that. And he's been okay or fine for college football purposes, and even for CFF purposes. He can run, he can scramble and like that. That makes things fun for CFF or C to C. But we talked last week what we're looking for with QBs and how you can dumb it down and just look at the adjusted yards per attempt. What do we say? We're looking like 9.5, 10, something like that. 8.7 adjusted yards per attempt for Sam Levitt here throughout his career, and that's with Jordan Tyson, one of the best prospects that we've seen, in at least a top 10 prospect that we've seen in the last couple of years. And what's going to happen when you don't have a Jordan Tyson level prospect? And there's some decent players at LSU. I don't know that there's a Jordan Tyson there. In fact, I would probably even go as far as to say there's definitely not a Jordan Tyson there. As much as we love Jace Brown and players of that ilk, Jordan Tyson's just a different level. And so I don't think it's going to be a terrible year. There has been obviously some growing pains with having a second surgery, not being there for the spring. Hussein Longstreet looking amazing in the spring and everything else. So I'm with Aaron. I guess I've grown as an analyst. I've grown as even a fan of college football or whatever. I truly don't believe these coaches have the balls to really do it. We've seen it rarely happen where a Lincoln Riley, switches Caleb Williams in over Spencer Rattler, in an important game. That's the extreme levels, and we don't see it happen very often. I'd be very surprised if they went out, spent a bunch of money to bring Sam Levitt in, and then all of a sudden went, "All right, Hussein, you're up, baby." As much as I would love to see that, I mean, I think Aaron's talked about in the past how much Longstreet I have on my C2C squads. I think I'm sitting at like 75% rostership, so I would love it. I just don't see it happening. But obviously, Longstreet could be amazing in the near future. As far as 2027 is concerned. I just don't see it with Levitt. It's going to be, I mean, honestly, it could be very similar to Garrett Nussmeier, where he is, so overly hyped, and then the season happens, and they're like, oh, that's what we did. That's who we put at QB, and then next thing you know, you're a round 7 NFL draft pick, and that's what I would probably see for Sam Levitt. Maybe not round 7, but somewhere around there. Day 3. How about that?
Yeah, he was one of the guys. I've got 3 QBs on my list that I wanted to talk about. Levitt was one of them. Just a really underwhelming season last year. When you talk about sub 7 yards per attempt, and that's like before the adjustment. You mentioned 8 point whatever with the adjustment. It's just not good. So I don't quite understand it. Just because these guys are, I was thinking the same thing. We don't have to worry about it this year. It doesn't look like because Brendan Sorsby won't play, but just because like the transfer portal is giving you these guys these valuations that like, oh, this is going to be the $8 million quarterback this season. He's going to be the prize of the quarterback transfer portal. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good or a potential NFL player. I don't know where they come up with these numbers, because Levitt wasn't even a particularly good, college quarterback. If you're just looking at last year, yeah, he brought them to the playoffs with Cam Scatteraboo and peak Jordan Tyson, where he had him for the majority of the season without any injuries. But beyond that, like once you took away the people that were really winning the games for them, Levitt was kind of, out there by himself, with his pants down. Didn't look good. So I hope that, with Lane Kiffin coming in, and he has started Trinidad Chambliss over Austin Simmons in the past, and Trinidad's a guy that came from Division II out of nowhere. Maybe it's possible, because I'm sure Hussein Longstreet wasn't cheap either. They probably paid a lot of money to get him as well. So maybe it is possible that they do, yank him before too many games pass if Levitt is struggling. And I don't have LSU's schedule right in front of me. I don't know if they're going to play anything significant within the first few weeks, but if there's any sign of trouble before they get into the heart of the SEC schedule, I would not be surprised one bit if Levitt is holding the clipboard.
Yeah, and like we said last week, there's a difference between college football QBs and NFL QBs, and you can be a high-end talented college QB, a la a Trinidad Chambliss or somebody to that effect, and not like a Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow changed the world of college football, and then he went to the NFL, and they're like, no, dude, this is not how you play football. So Sam Levitt can be fine, and he could take LSU to the national championship this year. That's not going to change my opinion on him as a player, as a fifth year player who has really not shown us anything that makes me. I mean, there was a time where it was like maybe in year two, I'm like maybe Sam Levitt could be a thing, and then he had multiple years of Jordan Tyson and playing in the Big 12, and it did not ever become anything. And I'm like, no, it's we're too late at this point. He would have to take a Jaden Daniels, and maybe, hey, it is LSU, but he would have to take a Jaden Daniels level jump, and I don't see the numbers that made me believe in Jaden Daniels with Sam Levitt. I just don't see it. So we'll have to hope and pray that he can make that kind of jump. Andy, you said you had a few QBs. That was actually my only QB. I could have mentioned some other ones, but as I was looking through it, I was like, honestly, we said we're not going to talk about Bryce Underwood. We're not going to talk about Dante Moore. Those are the two big ones for me. So I didn't really have too many qualms with anyone else. I mean, there were some freshmen. I guess I don't know if you're going to get into the freshmen. There was a couple of freshmen that are way too high.
There's nothing I can say about the freshmen. Like, yes, there's some that are too high, but at the end of the day, like 1 out of 3 of them are probably going to be fine. Just figuring out which one of the 3 is the mystery.
Right.
So, freshmen always
there's definitely freshmen that are way too high. That being said, I wasn't going to talk about them tonight.
Right. I mean, it's just like Russian roulette. You're just hoping the one that you pick is the one that works. But the other QB, and John, you might not be happy about it, but I'm ready to put to bed the Lenoris Sellers entire storyline. I'm done with it.
All right, I'm ready to fight.
Okay. Well, he by your own metrics, he didn't hit the big time throw rate last year. He only had 13 touchdowns in 12 games to 8 interceptions. And I know what you're going to say. Oh, who's he throwing it to? He's throwing it to Nick Harbor and Vandrevius Jacobs. Yeah, well, you know what? Good quarterbacks make their wide receivers better, and Lenoris Sellers is not making anyone better. He didn't even have 60% completion last year. Oh, he's playing in the SEC. It's harder competition. No. There's no more excuses for the guy. Like, if this guy's going to be where he's going right now, which is essentially definitely a top 10 QB in Devy, but people are still touting him as like a potential first-round draft pick. I think that you have to look at him that way if you're drafting him where people are drafting him still. And there's just nothing that he's done to show us that that's in his future so far. And like, okay, if he had nobody to throw to last year, who's he going to throw it to this year? It's not like they went out and got some Jeremiah Smith level guy to be the wide receiver 1 for him. You're just going to see the same thing you saw last year. South Carolina's going to lose a bunch more games. Their coach is probably going to get fired. And Lenoris Sellers is just not going to look good again. So I don't know what people are waiting for, what they want to see, or if they're just like, you know what, he's never going to have good stats in college. We like what we see on tape, and that's what we're going to stick with. So I'm laying it to bed. I'm done with Lenoris Sellers. I think he needs to be off of my Devy rankings at this point.
All right, I have to vehemently disagree here with you because this is the year to get back in on Lenoris Sellers. And hear me out. Yes, he is not meeting the thresholds that we're looking for. He's at 9.2 intended air yards. We're hoping for 9.5 at the very least. He is meeting the big time throw rate threshold of 5%. He's at 5.66%. So we like to see that over the course of his college career. His PPR points per touch are the highest of anyone in the top actually of anyone. His PPR points per touch are higher than anyone in college football right now. Yes, things have not been great, but we can expect change. Kendall Briles, I believe is how you say his name, is coming over from TCU as the new offensive coordinator. Go look at TCU's offense and what they've done, and then go look at what South Carolina has done over the past few years. And at the very least, you have to assume that things are going to be better. Their offensive line could not possibly get any worse from what it has been. And so their offensive line, you have to expect, is going to get better. They actually have some consistency coming on with the players that they've kept, and you have to expect things are going to get better. This is going to be Lenora Sellers' best year as a passer, as a player, and he's already almost meeting those thresholds that we're looking for. So what happens when you give him a decent offense, decent offensive line, and all that? I'm not saying that Lenore Sellers is gonna go out and be QB1. I'm not saying he's gonna go out and be the QB1 in next year's class, because it is in the realm of possibilities.
Here's where you're wrong, because the numbers you gave me are still not correct. I know how your model works. Like, you do averages of seasons and stuff of like the last 2 years or 3 years or whatever. I think it's heavily weighing that 2023 season for PPR points per touch, where he only had 5 touches and 3 of them were for touchdowns. Because in 2024 he threw 7 picks, fumbled 11 times. Last year, or 2024, in last year he had 8 interceptions and fumbled another 6 times, and that's only on 18 total touchdowns throughout the entire season. I just don't see it at all. I think that the PPR points per touch thing, I don't know where those numbers are coming from. But even if I'm looking at his career as a whole as a passer, not like just weighing average seasons, his big time throw rate is under 5%. His ADOT is right at 9.5, but his yards per attempt, or no, that was last year's 9.5. His ADOT for his career is 9.3. Yards per attempt is 8.5. Like, I need to see 9. I wanted to be closer to 9, and like only 33 touchdowns throughout essentially, starting 2 full seasons, and then he was 15 picks. Like, I don't understand why you still like this guy, if I'm being honest with you. I think there's something wrong with like his Beth score, and it's clouding your judgment. And my theory is it's because that he played like one game in 2023, and it was like the most insane 5 touches of all time.
That's fair, and it very well could be. Honestly, PPR points per touch is not a big part of Devy Beth for QBs. It's just something that I look at more than anything else. But we're really looking at that big time throw rate and that intended air yards. We're hoping if he can get there as a passer, the NFL is going to fall in love with him as an athlete. We already know that. And so if he gets anywhere close to those thresholds, mind you, like players like Anthony Richardson and Trey Lance never got anywhere close to those thresholds. But if he can just get close or possibly even surpass those thresholds, he's already close. That's why I'm in love. And honestly, like, normally I'm not the one to sit here and talk about coaches and stuff, but I truly do believe that he was in a terrible situation last year, and he's in a better situation this year.
I'm having fun here, guys. Good work. I will say that, yes, the situation's getting better for Lenora Sellers, though it's not like magically he has these elite guys to throw the ball to, right? I mean, he's still going to have some question marks there for sure. I have to wave or take a little lap or whatever the case is as one of my bold calls, or I don't think it was even the hot takes episode last fall, but it was like one of the other episodes where we were just kind of like throwing out some guys that we think are going to like disappoint or whatever. And I'm like, I'm just going to be bold and take like the consensus top 3 quarterback, and I'll say Lenora Sellers is gonna fall. Like, he's not gonna be like a first round guy, and that was bold at the time. But I mean, I'm glad I said that, because I mean, I have 0 shares of him at this time, right? So I still think that he has a chance. Like John said, he could ascend. He's got one of the higher upside profiles within this class. But also, like Andy said, I mean, he could be so bad where we're just talking about him as like just a total developmental type of guy who slides down considerably if he just doesn't figure things out and get more efficient, effective, and consistent. So I'm somewhere in the middle. Again, thinking he's still potentially within that top 10-ish range, but easily can drop out of it as well for Lenora Sellers. But no, I thought you guys made good points. I am curious if you guys have any tight ends.
I considered a tight end. I think I've talked about how Trey Green is a little overhyped for me, but I decided that he is overhyped, but I don't know if I really want to go out on a limb and just be like he's terrible or anything like that. And so I scratched him off my list.
That's fair.
I
And
mean,
I like
I would
Trene's grade
put
a lot, but I mean, maybe not as much as consensus. But how about you, Andy?
I would put Lincoln Kier on there.
Yep.
I don't think he's done anything yet. There's no reason for him to be considered a top five of anything. Much less, I mean, I understand that if you're going to do it, it has to be for a tight end, but I don't. There's like he didn't show us anything, so it's all speculative at this point. There's no reason to keep him in your top five positions, and it's expensive still. Like if you're getting Lincoln Kier, it's still costing you quite a lot. So there's just no reason to continue to rank him that high until he shows us that it actually is worth something, which he has not done yet.
Yeah, totally agree. That's a good call with Kier. It does not justify that price at all. I cannot believe that he's going that high as the tight end two in Devy ADP right now. That's just ridiculous. But I don't think people are actually paying up that price in actual drafts. But maybe I'm mistaken, right? He's probably going way too high regardless. So yeah, good call on here. I guess the last guy I wanted to shout out here is Dallas Wilson, a guy who I like the profile of. The flashes are so fun. But Dallas Wilson, he is priced out as what, the wide receiver, is it 9 in Devy ADP? He's priced out as the most expensive Florida wide receiver, which is crazy because he's probably going to be the wide receiver 3 on that team because the guy cannot stay healthy. He's still not healthy with that foot and ankle. That's just given him so much trouble going back to last year. Big guys like that with lower extremity injuries that are nagging, I don't love it. And and he needs a lot of development. Like the guy has so many great physical traits. Just give me well, there's a lot of players further down the ranks that I would rather have. I mean, give me the TJ Moores, give me the other Florida guys, give me, I'm trying to think of a couple other guys off the top of my head. Who was I thinking? Mario Craver. Give me Cedarian Morgan. CD Morgan, he is basically the freshman version. You get to re-roll if you just trade, offload Dallas Wilson and just say, you know what, I'm going to take the guy who's an early enrollee impressing for Alabama, Cedarian Morgan, who has somewhat of a similar skill set and size and whatever. So for me, yeah, it just makes no sense, the ADP with Dallas Wilson.
You don't have to tell me twice. I don't really get it. There was a time where there was a reason to believe in Dallas Wilson. I believe we are beyond that time. And honestly, the longer we go into the offseason, it seems like the second guy, not Aaron Vilo, is going to win this job for Florida. And that's going to be terrible for everyone. I mean, there's not going to be a single pass past 8 yards down the field, and that's going to hurt Dallas Wilson. The only thing that might help is Vernell Brown, but I don't like any of it. Now, I will say, if Aaron Philo wins this job, if it happens, or if he takes over at some point, I could see some fireworks in Florida's offense. They have the firepower. We know that. They just need a QB. I mean, everything I've heard is that Philo's losing this job, which is kind of wild. But I don't want to act like I'm some kind of like Florida insider or anything like that because I'm definitely not. I just go off of what I'm hearing from other podcasts and reading in articles. But I mean, the fact that Dallas Wilson's still not healthy, he's played literally 3 games. He had one good game in those 3 games where he did really look good. But the fact that there's people taking Dallas Wilson over his teammate Vernell Brown is just wild. And then when you start mentioning some of the other names, and that's not even talking about Eric Singleton Jr. is there. It's like I said, they have firepower in Florida. I just looked at the time, and I wanted to go on an hour and a half rant about Jaden Boss. So we're gonna need to go long here, but I had a couple other wide receivers that I guess I won't spend much time on, but you guys can tell me how crazy it is. Like I said, we were getting a little more wild here towards the end, and so I wanted to go a little more into these guys, but I'm gonna do it. Nick Marsh is overrated. And I gotta say it, man. I just gotta say it. He is being drafted as the wide receiver, as a top 5 wide receiver in all of Devy, and yet, what has he done And yes, obviously he was in a very bad offense, and so people. But I'm the market share guy. I'm the one that finds the teams. I'm the one that finds the Zay Flowers, even though he's on a horrible Boston College team. And I go look at the market share. Look at Nick Marsh's market share. This is not some amazing player that like is going to change the game or anything like that. In fact, that offense was so bad, but yet Amari Kelly, you guys know Amari Kelly, right? Like this stud player. No, he's not a stud player. He actually had almost the same amount of yards as Nick Marsh last year, and he actually played 2 less games. He was more efficient than Nick Marsh on a per play basis, and yet people are sitting there going, well, Nick Marsh is amazing. Well, now, okay, he's going to Indiana. That's why we love him, right? Indiana does not have Fernando Mendoza anymore. They have Josh Hoover. Go look at Josh Hoover's numbers, and you will very quickly realize he is not Fernando Mendoza, nor will he ever be Fernando Mendoza, even if he takes a step forward in his 5th season in college football. He's not Fernando Mendoza, and he's going to figure out very quickly that playing in the Big Ten is not the same as playing in the Big 12. All those turnovers, everything, I think this is a player. Honestly, like, I think that Josh Hoover could be benched at some point this season because I think it could get that catastrophic for him. He is not a good quarterback. He is a Big 12 quarterback. Let's just put it that way. And he's. I don't think things are going to work out quite the same way that people are expecting it to work out, and that's going to affect Nick Marsh, who already has some question marks in his profile. So I don't love him. I don't hate him, but when you're talking about a top 5 guy, and I have him, I gotta switch over. I have him as a top 25 guy, not a top 5 guy. So I'm like, hey, once again, I don't hate the player. I don't think he's absolute garbage or anything like that. But get out of here with this top 5 stuff when we have proven players that we can actually put up there in the ranks.
That's bold. I do like Nick Marsh. So as a guy that I'm pretty high on, maybe not quite top 5, but definitely contending for that slot. That's kind of eye-opening for me. So I attribute some of the inconsistencies last year to the inconsistent quarterback play and also the injury that happened early in the season. And yes, he came back from that and played, I mean, pretty much a full season, but he did not look like he was the same guy as we saw that freshman year where he was more explosive for sure. And so he did pretty well in that freshman season. So I expect a bounce back season, just like what we saw, a bounce back season for Omar Cooper or a breakout season for Omar Cooper and Surratt and even Charlie Becker. Yes, they're not going to have maybe that extent of success. It's going to look differently, right, than last year. But even if it's not Hoover, which I expect it to be Hoover, I think Hoover, he'll do fine in the system. Again, he's not going to be like a first round pick type of guy, but I actually think that he'll do all right. He's been able to pass at a pretty high volume previously, and it's a quarterback friendly system and a wide receiver friendly system, to be honest, too. So I still like Nick Marsh, but that is interesting for sure. And yeah, I guess I didn't really even think of him as being overrated. He's definitely getting propped up there with the anticipation that Indiana does similar things to what they did last year, and they probably should fall back down from an expectation standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, after last season, his ranking shouldn't have gone up, right? So, yes, I understand he's going to Indiana. Yes, I understand we're excited about what he did as a freshman. I kind of look at it in the same way that, to a lesser extent, obviously, not in the same tier, but like what happened with Ryan Coleman Williams. Awesome freshman season. Took like a step back because of some injuries in his sophomore year. Hoping for a big bounce back. That got priced into Ryan Williams, though. The opposite happened to Nick Marsh. Like, we're pricing in the transfer to Indiana, which I don't necessarily agree with. Because, for one, Charlie Becker's there, and if you're asking me for my money, like, I would take Charlie Becker over Nick Marsh right now if you put the two in front of me and said I could only have one. So, overrated, yes. but certainly could have that season to where he justifies the value at some point. Maybe not justifies that value, but justifies like top 10 value. Um, that's like getting back to me not feeling like highly convicted on anybody being like terribly overrated. But certainly after the season he had last year, we should have seen the ranking come down a little bit. But I think like you said, we're a lot of Devy players are also C2C players, and I think that they're just pricing in that potential college production into his Devy value to some extent, which isn't necessarily what you want to be doing. But I think that that's probably a symptom of what's going on here.
Well, it's the national championship boost. The Indy, and we lost Andy, or at least we lost his recording. We'll see if we lost him for good. But we, it's the national championship boost. And you see him going to the team that just won the national championship. Aaron mentioned they just boosted Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper Jr., even Charlie Becker, and you go, oh, what are they going to do with Nick Marsh? Unfortunately, it's not the same team. It's not the same. It's not the same thing. And we have Andy back, I believe. Brett's in the chat. He says, let's go. And great show topic, by the way. We appreciate you, Brett. Appreciate you listening. And yeah, I love talking about overrated players. Next week, we're going to talk about underrated players. That's not nearly as much fun because, most people just disagree with you and they go, who cares? That guy is important. You start talking about Nick Marsh isn't important. They go, wait a second. I got to figure this out, So I probably should have led with my other wide receiver before we get into Jaden Ball. We're already over the hour. Because I feel like this one's not going to be as controversial, but Latsier Brooks, what are we doing, people? I just don't understand. He's listed as 5'9", and I'm not the sizest, but I know you guys are. I'm saying you, the listeners, not you, Aaron and Andy. I know you guys are. He's listed as 5'9", which means he's 5'7", and I just don't understand how a player who had 400 and something yards last year, yes, as a true freshman, but a player that had a 400 and something yards, inefficient, just the PPR points per touch are low, the yards per team pass attempt are low, like everything is low, and yet we're going to freak out about it. Meanwhile, Ryan Coleman Williams actually has a better quarterback to give him the ball this year. We're expecting better things. Obviously, we're expecting a healthy season as well. And then Sedarian Morgan is one of our favorite freshman recruits in this class. On top of the other players that were already there and everything else. I'm sorry, Latsier Brooks is being ranked as a top 12 wide receiver in Devy right now. He was not a top 4 receiving option on his own team last year. Yes, I understand Jeremy Bernard is gone. I understand that, oh man, what's the other guy's name? And now I can't think of his name. There's another 5th-year guy or whatever. He's no longer there. But these are not players that we're overly excited about. And he also was outproduced by Josh Cuevas, the tight end for Alabama as well. So why are we overly excited about a slot receiver, a 5'7" guy who is never going to be anything amazing? He's never going to be the wide receiver 1 for Bama. He's never going to be the wide receiver 1 for your dynasty team. Why do we have him as a top 12 Devy wide receiver when we're talking about a generational 2027 wide receiver class and this and that and everything else? I just don't understand it. Please help me. I know I've been the Latsier Brooks hater, but just give me a reason to like him beyond, oh, well, he had 400 yards when he was a freshman.
I won't go too long on this. I mean, I can see where you're coming from. I have some concerns about the size. He did enough as a freshman to catch my attention. I think there is continued opportunity for him to play a pretty prominent role there in what could be a pretty fun passing offense. I mean, typically DeBoer offenses are exciting, and I expect ultimately the job to go to a talented Keelan Russell. So I'm excited for what's ahead there, and he could be a 3rd-year breakout once Ryan Williams is gone and any of the other upperclassmen guys there. But yeah, I mean, I like Sedarian Morgan. I like Ryan Williams at Alabama more than I like him. So yeah, that's fair with Latsier Brooks to a degree. I still have him in like my top 25 in Devy ranks though, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like I would much rather have Andrew Marsh, who I think is rated below him in a lot of places. But same thing with Aaron. Like it was a fine freshman season. Market share was okay enough to like not be too scared off from it. So there's room to grow. So it's not worth like abandoning the entire player, obviously. But I think it is a little bit high to say he's a top 10 wide receiver. Absolutely.
Yeah, it actually kind of reminds me of another receiver that people lost their minds about for whatever reason, and it's Malcolm Simmons. And they're actually right back to back in my rankings and Debbie Beth's rankings right now. And it's just a player. And when I say, I think Aaron just said top 25. Andy, I don't know if you actually gave a rank or not. Latsier Brooks is Debbie Beth's wide receiver 60. So that is, and Malcolm Simmons is wide receiver 59. So back to back, but that's another player that was, I believe, another slot level player for Simmons. Yeah, another like slot level player who got a lot of hype and yeah, he's buried behind these guys, but blah, blah, well, no, but like just he's buried. So I think that's what Lassier Brooks is always going to be, and it doesn't really nothing I've seen has changed my mind on that. Wide receiver 60, and he's going as wide receiver 10 for some ranking services. Guys, we are well over the hour mark here, and we haven't even touched on Jaden Baugh. Do we do a quick? I've been talking about Jaden Ball, like how we're gonna do this segment. Do we do a quick Jaden Ball segment and just get it over with, or do we do a Jaden Ball like episode, or at least a large segment in a future episode?
I don't care either way. Like if you want to get the Jaden Boss stuff off your chest, that's fine. I don't know if Aaron has somewhere to go though, so it's up to him.
I'll let you get it off your chest here, John. And I mean, before you even start, I'll say that I mean, Jaden Bott, if the guy ran a sub 4.5 40-yard dash and proved us wrong from an athleticism standpoint, I'd be pretty high on the player. But at this time, the athleticism, the burst, the high end speed just does not seem to be there. And I will turn it over to my friend John.
All right. So I'm not going to go into the full diatribe that I was going to do because we would be here for a long time. All I'm going to say is go look at his game log and just understand that the Florida State game is doing so much for his season. The Florida State game being the Week 12 game when Florida State was obviously a terrible team, and they gave him 38 rushing attempts. He rushed for 266 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He did not have a single reception because why would you have a reception when all you have to do is just give him the ball and do whatever? But every game before that, he rushed for 7 yards per carry in that game. Every game before that, 5.3, 4.1, 3.8, 4.8, 6.5 against Mississippi State. Mississippi State, I just looked because I don't generally look at defenses and stuff. They were 107th out of 136 possible FBS teams in opponent's points per game. So they have a very, very bad defense. Let's just put it that way. And so he had a 6.5, 23 rushing attempts, 150 yards, 6.5 yards per carry, 1 touchdown against Mississippi State, 2 receptions for 21 yards against Mississippi State. Texas A&M the week prior, 18 for 65, 3.6 yards per carry. Texas, 27 carries for 107 yards, 4.0 a clip. Miami, 3.8 a clip, 4.6 a clip for LSU, 5.2 against USF, essentially a MAC program or American level program who just came to the Big 12 this year. I went to USF I have, I'm not trying to hate on USF. I'm just being real here, people. And then LIU in week one, 9 attempts for 104 yards and 11.6 yards per attempt. What doesn't sound right there? Like one of these things is not like the other. Two of these things are not like the other. And that's the LIU game and the Florida State game. You take those games away, and what do you have? You have a plotter running back who's very highly inefficient, not breaking tackles, not breaking big plays. And we see that even in the numbers with Jaden Baugh anyway. He's not breaking big plays even when you keep those big games in. Even with the Florida State game, once again, he was 38 rushing attempts. This isn't like a Bijan Robinson going for 12 rushing attempts and 266 yards. This is Jaden Baugh at 266 yards. The reception, or if you, okay, but he had 33 receptions, guys. 33 receptions this year. That means he's a receiving back. Like we can, no. 6.4 yards per reception. 6.4 yards is so bad. Emmett Johnson looks like Jahmyr Gibbs compared to Jaden Baugh. And Emmett Johnson's a garbage running back who should not be in the NFL. And Felix Sharp says Jaden Baugh is not running a 40. He's Katron Allen with a bell cow roll. Oh man, I don't want to agree with Felix here, but I think I have to. I really hate that, but I don't know. Maybe I've done my job here. I really wanted to go on a full rant, but guys, why is Jaden Baugh a top 10 running back in Devy? He's Jonah Coleman all over again, and yet we're assuming that he's in a better running back class than Jonah Coleman, where we wouldn't even say, like, people are trying to make Jonah Coleman a thing because he went to Denver. And yet it's like, oh, he got drafted in the 5th round, guys. Like, why are we getting overly excited about this?
Well, Jonah Coleman, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and be like a truther for him by any means, but I thought he was round 3. But either way, I mean, I guess it's not like a prominent, like guaranteed starting role for Jonah Coleman. And the same expectations should be there for Jaden Baugh to probably be more of a like bruising, like early down type of guy at the NFL level, not a difference maker. And honestly, he was really a productive, interesting sleeper running back coming out of high school. I remember watching his film and looking at his production. I'm like, gosh, this guy is a good receiving option out of the backfield. And then he put on like 20 pounds or something crazy like that just in the spring, like heading into his freshman season. And ever since then, he's kind of lost some of that burst, which was already kind of borderline to begin with. So that's my qualm with him. It's not necessarily those other abilities, which he's strong in many other aspects of his game. So, but as we've learned, these guys do not always just get athletic overnight unless they lose a lot of weight, which, I mean, I'll be watching that closely. No indication yet that Jaden Baugh has lost weight and honed in some explosiveness.
Yeah, and I just double checked. He was a 4th round pick, so I apologize. He was not a 5th round pick. He was a 4th round pick, but yeah, this is not top 7 RB like he's being ranked from some ranking services. Andy, how are you feeling about Baugh? I don't think you're different too much.
No. It is eye-opening when you look at those 2 games and how much heavy lifting they're doing. Like, he had 17 big-time runs in the entire season. 9 of them came against LIU and Florida State. And even with those big runs, yes, because of those 9, which is more than half of his big-time runs in 2 games, he's just barely crossing like the 7.5% big-time run rate. But what I like to do to like weed out the plotters is look at the breakaway yards per attempt, because that tells me, okay, yeah, they're getting 15-yard runs, but are those 15-yard runs turning into 30-yard runs, into 40-yard runs, into 80-yard runs? And he only, on 17 big-time runs, he only had 315 yards. So let me do a little bit of quick calculation here. That comes out to 18.5 yards. So he gets the big time runs, and then he just falls over, I guess. So and then another way to weed out is breakaway yards per attempt, because he only had 315 breakaway yards on 221 total carries. His breakaway yards per attempt was under 1.5, which is, it's almost like comically low. to be that bad. Like you need to be above 2 for me to even like continue to look at you. But to be under 1.5 is something I don't think I've ever seen. So it's a the numbers are like a false flag, I guess. It doesn't add up. Yes, he's got the 1,100 yard season. Yes, he's got over 30 catches. He scores some touchdowns. He's he's a big guy. Like he's a big back. Like, but it's just not going to translate into any sort of like athletic role in the NFL. If anything, it's going to turn into let's draft this guy on day 3, and then he'll be automatic as like a fullback or something, or in like the short yardage situations. Maybe that's like the best you can hope for is like a Kyle Juszczyk role or something for him in the NFL is how I look at it.
Yeah, and people will point to how terrible the Gators were last year, and they'll say, "Oh, but what if they're just stacking the box against him, and that's why he's so bad?" I would say that like you don't think teams were stacking the box against Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan Robinson or players like that in the past, but at the same time, that's when I start looking at the efficiency of the receiving and the 6.4 yards per reception is just god awful. I mean, it's just so bad. You almost have to be the slowest person in the world to catch a ball at like the line of scrimmage when no one's around you and only get 6 yards on a reception, on an average reception. And so it just makes me think that he's just the slowest person in college football. And so that's why I will not ever have any Jaden Baugh on any of my teams. I mean, I guess maybe for CFF, he could be viable, but if we're talking C2C or Devy, please sell him and get something, get anything for him, anything plus or whatever. Just make your team better. I'm glad. I feel so much better getting that off my chest. I've been wanting to talk about Jaden Baugh. You guys did not disappoint. You brought the fire with me about Baugh. Andy bringing the yards per attempt and all that kind of stuff that I don't even get into, but it just proves and it just shows how slow and inefficient that player is. Yeah, please sell that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this pod. It's definitely fun to talk about the overrated players. Like I said, next week we're going to talk about the underrated players. That might not be as much fun because you're essentially climbing up a mountain. You're having to tell people why they're wrong. And on top of that, tell them why they're wrong and why they need to go sell these overrated players for these underrated players. And people don't like to hear that. It's okay to tell them one side. You can't tell them both sides and then try to convince them of it. You can, and we're going to. But you guys are going to fight us at the very least. So if you are fighting us, we would love to hear from you. Whether you love us, hate us, whatever, we'd still love to hear from you. Who are your overrated players? Let us know in the comments at the Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel because we would love to know who you think are overrated, and also do you agree with our overrated players? Is probably even more important than that. Let us know. Obviously, like and subscribe everywhere you can. We appreciate everyone listening. I'm not even going to ask because we're well over the mark, so I'm not going to ask for words of wisdom or anything like that here. I'm just going to say really quick, are there any other names that we need to mention before we get into underrated players next week?
I think we did a good job. Quite a few names there. I'm
Yeah,
sure there's more
I
we
mean,
could find too, but
I'm sure we could come up with another name or two, but yeah, I don't want to get us off the rails anymore. Like we covered it enough, I would say.
All right, so now I'm going to go off on a 30-minute Malachi Tony. No, I'm just kidding. No, we promise we're not going to talk about him. We're not going to talk about him. We're not going to do it. But we really do appreciate you guys listening. It's been a fun show. We even had Felix here for the majority of it, and somehow it still was a fun show. So we do appreciate you guys listening, checking in on us, doing all that kind of good stuff. Make sure you're doing all that, and we will be back in your ears as soon as possible. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys.